Just 102 minutes. That's it. That's how long it took for a series of coordinated attacks to change the world on September 11th, 2001. In this explainer, we're going to break down exactly what happened that day, dig into the stated reasons behind it, and trace the ripple effects that are still shaping our lives, all based on the public record.
Okay, so picture it. It's a clear, beautiful Tuesday morning in New York City. People are grabbing coffee, heading to their offices. Inside the World Trade Center, thousands are already at their desks, starting the day. The city is just normal, and no one has any idea that in 60 seconds, everything is about to change forever. And really, that's the big question, isn't it? Because those 102 minutes weren't just an event. They were like a massive earthquake in history. They set off this chain reaction of political and social changes that, honestly, we're all still dealing with today. So, to understand it all, we have to start at the beginning. Why did it happen?
All right, let's dive into that. To get a handle on the attacks, we first have to look at the why. And that means looking at the stated motivations of the group that claimed responsibility, Al-Qaeda, and its leader, Osama bin Laden.
This quote right here, it's from a 1998 fatwa, which is a kind of religious ruling, where bin Laden basically declared war on the United States. And the truly chilling part is how clear he is about who the target is. This wasn't just against the military. It was aimed at every single American. That line between a soldier and a civilian, in this ideology, it was completely erased.
So what were their specific justifications? Well, according to Al-Qaeda's own statements, it boiled down to a few key things. First on their list was the presence of U.S. troops in Saudi Arabia, home to Islam's holiest sites. They saw this as a desecration. Next up was the long-standing American support for Israel. And finally, they pointed to the severe economic sanctions that were placed on Iraq after the Gulf War. In their eyes, these were the justifications for their war.
So, with that ideology as the foundation, let's turn to the day itself and see how this plan was put into motion. This was not a random act of violence. It was a meticulously planned assault, designed to cause the most destruction and the most psychological terror possible.
So the whole operation involved 19 terrorists hijacking 4 separate airplanes. Now, if you look at the flights here, you'll see they were all long-haul, cross-country flights. That was completely intentional. The reason they chose these specific planes was because they were carrying a massive amount of jet fuel for the trip. The hijackers weren't just stealing planes, they were turning them into massive guided missiles.
And this timeline just shows you how terrifyingly fast it all unfolded. 8:46 a.m., the first plane, American 11, hits the North Tower. Just 17 minutes later, at 9:03, the second plane hits the South Tower. That's the moment everyone watching knew this was a deliberate attack. At 9:37, a third plane crashes into the Pentagon. And then, the unthinkable begins. At 9:59, the South Tower collapses. Just 4 minutes later, at 10:03, we learn United 93 has crashed in a field in Pennsylvania after passengers and crew fought back. And finally, at 10:28 a.m., the North Tower collapses. That entire sequence, it was just 102 minutes.
The total human cost of those 102 minutes is just staggering. 2,996 lives were lost. That number includes 2,977 victims and the 19 hijackers. It remains the deadliest terrorist attack in history. It was also the deadliest single day for firefighters and law enforcement officers in the entire history of the United States.
So in the hours and days right after, the entire country was just in shock. The immediate response was this mix of disbelief, deep grief, and a series of actions that had never been taken before, as America just tried to process what had happened.
And get this, at 9:42 that morning, while the attacks were technically still happening, the FAA made a call that was completely unprecedented. They grounded every single civilian plane in U.S. airspace. We're talking more than 4,000 planes ordered to land at the nearest airport right now. For the first time in history, the skies over America were completely empty and silent, a really stark symbol of a nation on total lockdown.
The political impact was just as immediate. This chart shows what's often called a rally round the flag effect. In the face of this unbelievable crisis, the country unified almost overnight. President George W. Bush's approval rating shot up to 90%. That's the highest approval rating ever recorded for an American president. It was a powerful sign of just how much the nation came together.
But the true legacy of 9/11 goes way beyond that initial shock. The attacks set off this cascade of long-term changes that would completely remake American national security, our foreign policy, and even the small details of our daily lives.
The U.S. government responded with incredible speed and scale.
First, Congress passed what's called the Authorization for Use of Military Force, which gave the president really broad power to go after those responsible. Next, the Department of Homeland Security was created. This was the biggest reorganization of the government in more than 50 years. And finally, Congress passed the USA Patriot Act, which dramatically expanded the government's power for surveillance.
And these weren't just policies being made in Washington. They affected everyone. A perfect example is just going to the airport. Before 9/11, security was pretty relaxed. You could walk your family right to the gate. After 9/11, the TSA was created. And suddenly, we were all in long lines, taking our shoes off, putting liquids in little plastic bags. That became the new normal, a constant reminder of that day.
This entire response was given a name, a powerful banner, the War on Terror. And this was so much more than a slogan. It became the new blueprint for American foreign policy. It launched a global military campaign that led directly to the war in Afghanistan in 2001, the invasion of Iraq in 2003, and it would continue to shape global politics for the next 2 decades.
But in the midst of all these huge historical changes, it is so important to come back to the human cost. This chart breaks down where the 2,977 victims lost their lives. Over 2,600 people at the World Trade Center, 125 at the Pentagon, and 246 passengers and crew on those 4 flights. No one on the plane survived. It's just vital that we remember that behind every one of these numbers is a person, a family, a community that was changed forever.
And so we end right where we started, with those 102 minutes. They weren't just a moment in time. They were the beginning of a whole new chapter. From the way we travel, to the wars that have been fought, to this ongoing debate about security versus freedom. The legacy of that morning is woven into the very fabric of our world today. Which really just leaves us with one final question to think about. How have the echoes of that single morning continued to shape your life?